I'm Brian Holt, a product manager at Stripe, and welcome to the Complete Intro to Web Development version 3. I created this course because I feel like it's the best time ever to enter the coding world. In this course, you will go from not knowing how to code to creating your very first web application. In this course, we'll learn how to use HTML so you can put content on a page, CSS so you can make it look nice, and JavaScript to make it interactive. By the end of this course, you will code a clone of Wordle, an app that sold for millions of dollars to the New York Times. I hope you enjoy the course. Let's talk about divs, which is short for division. I like to think of divs like cardboard boxes. A cardboard box is more defined by what's in it than the cardboard box itself, right? Like the most interesting part of a cardboard box is not the box. Unless you're a cat. It's more what's inside of the box that makes a difference. So here I just put a random div here so that you can see. Here I just made it a red square using a little bit of CSS here, which again, we'll have a whole section on CSS. But in and of itself, if I just do div like this is an empty cardboard box. There's literally nothing in it. I have to put something in it for it to be interesting. So now I have a cardboard box that has a heading in it. That's way more interesting than an empty cardboard box. So a div, which is a division, is basically you're identifying this part of something is distinct from something else. It's a generic divider between something. Like it'd be like if you have like a filing cabinet, you could put dividers between your various different types of files, right? So we'll use them a lot. It's actually one of the most common tags to use because typically you have a lot of divisions of various different sorts of things in your code. But in and of themselves, they don't do anything. They're defined by what they're in. This will make a lot of sense once we start getting into CSS because you'll use divs and CSS together to move things around, to make them different colors, all those sorts of stuff. So again, this div here, it's defined by its style and what I put on it. I basically took a marker and made a pretty div. But I can put things inside of it as well, which is what I just did there. A button, as you may have guessed, is a button. So you can see here I have this click me button. It doesn't do anything, right? But that's how you create buttons in HTML, is with the button tag. So you can think of this button like a doorbell that someone installed in a house and didn't actually hook up to anything. It's a button. You can totally press the doorbell. It's just not going to do anything, right? I've installed my doorbell on this particular page, and I just never hooked it up to anything. So if you click the button, nothing happens. In other words, typically you need JavaScript for the button to react to something. Question mark? No, it doesn't do anything. But these are just good things that you can show to users, like, hey, you should click this because it's going to do something, right? Like if you have like a form on a checkout page and you have a checkout button that you're telling the user, hey, click me, I'm going to do that action that the button says, right? Okay. Let's talk about image tags, which are IMG tags. So some people kind of get confused. It's like, shouldn't an image live in CSS? It's like, it's style, right? But think about it. If you go to like Instagram, right, a social media site for images, the content of Instagram is the images, right? So it actually normally belongs in the content. The images typically will live in your HTML. I just say that because that was really confusing to me when I was starting. I was like, why am I putting my images? Why am I putting my style in my HTML? Particularly with images, they belong more to the content than they belong to the style. You can sometimes use images with CSS, and we'll talk about that. But you can like make background images. But like, look at like the dotted background here on my website. That would be a good candidate for like a background image as opposed to like a content image. And I'm talking a content image is more like if you go to like the newspaper and you're reading the newspaper and there's like a big image of like whatever the top story is, that's content, right? That's part of the story. That should live in your HTML. Okay? So I have 3 image tags here of my best doggo, Luna. Very cute doggy. She's kind of a jerk. I love her. The way I do that is I have an image tag. You give it an src, which stands for source, as you might imagine. You tell it where it lives, right? So this is just an address, right? So if I copy and paste this into a different tab, right? This is actually like a valid address on the internet for Luna, okay? And I give it an alt text. So an alt text is if someone is hard of seeing or blind, they can tab over this, and obviously they can't see the image, right? So the screen reader will tell them what you put here in the alt. So I'm going to say technically it is valid to leave these off, but I'm going to tell you that if you have an image tag, you should always put an alt text. It's just like the ethical thing to do so that everyone can enjoy the internet. The internet is for everybody. Okay? Now notice here, these are self-closing tags, which we talked about, right? Because there's nothing inside of the image, right? The image is just a tag unto itself. So that's why you're going to put this slash here, and technically it is optional. You can leave it off. I just choose to put it on there because to me it makes it more clear what I'm trying to do. Oh, one more thing about alt text. Google and Bing will index it. So Google will crawl your website, it'll find all those alt texts, and it'll index your images based on that as well. So alt text is always a good idea. So an example here is I have this function called add2 that accepts a number, and what it returns is that same number plus 2. I can then call add2 anywhere, and I can give it something, and what do you think it's going to do? What is final answer here going to be? 7, right? Because it's going to take 5. This number here is going to be 5. It's going to take 5, it's going to add 2, and it's going to return that. So whatever returns back here is going to be final answer. Okay, what happens if I do that again underneath here? Other answer equals add 2 with, I don't know, 10. And I say console.log other answer. What do you think the second log is going to be? 12. So I've now made this reusable function, like this compacted little bit of code that's usable over and over and over again. This is like a fundamental concept of programming, because now we don't have to repeat ourselves. We can make these like little utility functions that can make us, like, that can encapsulate some piece of logic that we can reuse over and over again. Obviously, add2 is super contrite, right? I could have just done here, right? I could just put 5 plus 2 here, right? And that's the same thing. But the concept here that I want you to learn is that you can put logic into these functions and reuse them. So this only takes in one. This is called a parameter, this number thing. It's things that it accepts, right? This here now has a bunch of parameters. It has first name, last name, honorific. And honorific is like a title, right, that someone has, like doctor or lord or something like that. And then a greeting. And then it makes this string out of it, right? So it says, greeting, honorific last name. I'm extremely pleased you could join us. First name. I hope you enjoy your stay. Honorific last name. So if I call it once here with Brian, so Brian will go into first name, right? Holt will go into last name. Lord will go into the honorific, and salutations will go into the greeting, and I get salutations, Lord Holt. I'm extremely pleased you could join us. Brian, I hope you enjoy your stay, Lord Holt. I can then call it again with a different set of parameters. Jack, Sparrow, Captain, and Ahoy. So then it would be Ahoy, Captain Sparrow. I'm extremely pleased you could join us, Jack. I hope you enjoy your stay, Captain Sparrow, right? So hopefully you're starting to see some of the value here is like, I could have rewritten this string multiple times out. Like you can imagine this is like a hotel bot, right, that welcomes you to your stay at your hotel. And it allows you to choose your greeting and call yourself Captain, I guess. But here I'm encapsulating logic so I don't have to repeat myself a lot. I can kind of just make this like template function and then reuse it over and over again. So something that you're probably grasping here is the way that you call a function or use a function, but the way that the terminology of using a function is to call a function. is these parentheses. So when you see these parentheses at the end of something, your brain should be going off, that's a function. That's calling a function, it's doing function things. So even here, what is log? Log is a function, right? And we'll talk about like the dot part here in the next section. But that's what log is. Log is just a function that's available to us. Okay, let's try another one with various different parameters. My home city, my home state, and my home country. And you can log out your home of saying my home city, my home state, my home country. That's going to call this function here with city, state, and country. It's then going to log out directly you are from city, state, country. Again, I could do it one more time here as well. Oops. And instead of this, we could put, I don't know, you're from Olympia instead of, you know, Washington, or you can be from Minneapolis, Minnesota, right? Or we could go as you are from, I don't know, Bergamo, which is also in the Lombardy in Italy, right? All right, so now we're marking everything correctly. So we did that, that's finished that to do. We got one thing left to do, which is to validate the word. So let's go ahead and do that. Shouldn't be too complex of a function here. You could make an extra function that does this outside of commit. I'm just going to do it directly inside of commit. Up to you how you choose to do that. So first thing we're doing is we're going to set is loading to true, right? Because we're going to load something from an API. We're going to set loading to be true because it is now loading. This is an async function, so we can do an async await in here. We're going to say const res equals await fetch, and then we're going to fetch from https://words.dev-apis.com/validate-word. Cool. And if you remember, we have to tell it the method, which is a post, and we have to give it a body, which is going to be json.stringify word current guess. So this is going to post to that API that we talked about, and it's going to get back, is this a valid 5-letter word? So we're going to request from this API the validate word. We're going to post, and we're going to stringify word current guess. This is going to post to that API, and it's going to ask, is this a valid 5-letter word? Okay, so I'm going to say const res object equals await res.json. And then I'm going to say const valid word equals res object dot valid word. Now I'm going to show you just a little. I'll put this in a comment. This is how I would actually typically write it. These two lines are exactly the same. By putting these curly braces here, you say, I know there's something called valid word inside of res object, so pull it out and make it a variable called valid word. It's a little cryptic. People that are new typically struggle with that syntax, but you'll see it. So I'll leave that in there for you if you want to. Cool. So now we'll set to, we're done loading, so is loading is now assigned false. And we'll say set loading to be false as well. So now we have this valid word. We know if it's a valid 5-letter word or not, so what are we going to do about it? Well, if it's not a 5-letter word that's valid, we're going to say, so if it's not a valid word, Again, this exclamation point just makes trues into falses and falses into trues. So if I have, you can think of it as not, right? Exclamation point means not. So if it's not true, it's what? False. If it's not false, it's what? So basically I'm saying, if this is not a valid word, then do this. It would be the same thing of doing if this, do nothing else, do this, right? Same thing, but we use this everywhere. So if it's not a valid word, then what do? Well, we don't let them guess, right? That's the point here. So we'll have some function here called mark invalid word or something like that. And then we will return, right? Because we don't want to go on to trying to mark the guess because they didn't guess a valid word. Okay. Let's go down here and we'll make a function here called mark invalid word. And I would be fine here if you just wanted to say not a valid word and move on. Totally fine with me. So here if I say blah, it's just going to say not a valid word and it's not going to let you move on, right? So I can try again, not a valid word, and I can here and come back and say pools, which it should be a valid word, right? Because the API is going to validate that it's a valid word. If you look at our network requests here, you can see that I have a bunch of requests to validate word. Make sense? So now we're doing post requests, which is pretty cool. So I'll show you what I did in mine. I made it a little bit nicer for mark invalid word, and I used a little bit of animation. Animations are always kind of wonky. Like you always have to do some funny stuff because the browser doesn't necessarily have the best ways to interact with animations. So what I want to do is I want to quickly add a class to this so it flashes an animation, and then I want to take the class off because it doesn't remain an invalid word. It just becomes an invalid word, and then you set the user back to try again, right? So you just want to flash something and then take it away. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quick. Okay, so I have this class, if you remember from our CSS, called, not spin. We could make them spin, that'd be fun. But I called it flash. So if you mark it with an invalid, it's going to flash this red color for 1 second. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say for let I equals 0, I is less than answer.length, I plus plus. We're going to say letters. And actually we can just go ahead and do basically the same thing here. Grab that. Instead of adding wrong, we're going to add invalid, right? Okay, so let's even just see what that looks like for just a second. So if we say something like this, notice that it flashes red for a second. Pretty cool, right? I think that's a pretty compelling interface to show someone like, hey, this isn't correct, try again. But here's the problem. If I change it again and do it again, it's not flashing it. Why? Well, if you inspect here, these are all now invalid. I can keep adding invalid to it, but it's already invalid, right? So it's not going to flash it again because it's only going to do invalid that first time. So we have to put it on there, and then we have to take it off. So how do we do that? A bunch of ways you could go about doing this. We're going to do a really lazy way called set timeout. This is like, hey, browser, wait for some undisclosed amount of time and then do something. So I'm going to write a function here that says same thing, except I just want you to remove it. And then how long do we want it to wait? It's in milliseconds. I'm just going to say 10, right? Which is basically, faster than you can blink, I think. I think blinking takes more than a cent a second. Actually, I'm not really sure. Suffice to say, very fast. So the way that I actually want this to work is I want to just remove it if it was already there. If I call remove and it's not there, it just doesn't do anything. I need to wait long enough for the browser to say, okay, I understand what you asked me to do. It's called a repaint, right? And then I want to add it. Okay, let's try that again. The first time it's not going to be there, so nothing bad is going to happen, right? And then the invalid class actually does just stay there. That doesn't matter to anyone else besides us, the programmer, right? But now if I hit enter again, it'll remove it just long enough so that I can add it back. Kind of a fun way to do it. If you don't feel like doing that, just alerting it's not a valid word would have been totally acceptable here as well.